Good evening, students. Good evening, Adele. Adele, I know we spoke on the phone a few minutes ago. Are there any announcements from your side?
Good evening, Owen.
Hi, Adele.
Owen, if they can just again post their student numbers, I'm happy. And then I've said also that tonight, for a change, we'll ask them to just complete the feedback form again. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, Adele. Okay, good evening, students. Welcome to tonight's session. As Adele stated, just as per usual, um, put your student numbers into the chat function, and then Adele is going to post, okay, put on the chat the evaluation form for you guys to complete again. I just had a discussion with Adele before my class started, and there's some other things she would like me to address in terms of revision. I'm submitting all of that to her tomorrow, and once approved by her, she will make it available to all of you guys. Okay, so it will be for all three modules, intensive revision and extra revision, especially on Saturdays, will happen in the last week of November. But that will be included in the revision template, which I will submit to Adele tomorrow. Okay, so once she has given it a look over, a once over, and whatever, she will effect changes to it if she deems it necessary, and then it will be made available to you guys. What I'm going to propose before I start is for you guys to interact with me on a one-to-one session. Okay, I think those one-on-one sessions are really valuable. I've consulted with two students today. I've consulted with two students yesterday, and I think I'm consulting with more students tomorrow. Okay, so remember, as a registered student for a module, you are entitled to at least 2 consultation sessions per week per module. Okay, so before I start, good evening again to the students. Before I start, are there any questions for me? Any questions for me before I start? Let me see who's online so long. Okay, I have the usual suspects. I have Denzel, I have Belay Perez, I have Priscilla, um, I have Queen all the way from Joburg. I know Balisa. Kola Komisa, are you new? Indicate to me yes or no. And then Joanne Bowley, are you new? Just indicate in the chat function yes or no whether you're new before I start. Tola is new. Welcome, Tola. Okay, Joy, it's your second time joining. Okay, welcome, guys. Guys, Tola and Joy, just put a request in to Adele in the chat function so she can provide you with the links for the previous recordings to these sessions. There are recordings available, but I think you need to request it from Ms. Blacker, Adele Blacker. Just put it into the chat function for her to put the links in so that you can access the previous recordings. Okay. Let's start. Okay. Let's start. I want us to again go to page 7 of the course reader and go to study unit 1, where we're going to look at the concept of the law. Okay, we're going to look at the concept of the law. So students, we know that the understanding of the concept of law has various meanings, and okay, it already has various meanings for legal practitioners or those of us who are involved in the law. Okay? Then you still need to consider the layperson. But when we look at, and this is something I discussed yesterday as well, in terms of our ILW revision. Okay? When we look at the concept of the law, okay, or when we look at the definition of the term law, students, okay, we get two distinctive interpretations. Okay, firstly, we're looking at the narrow interpretation. We're looking at the narrow interpretation. Okay, or the strict interpretation. Okay, and if we consider the narrow or the strict interpretation of the concept of law, okay, it tells us that the law looks at a system or a body of rules governing human conduct, okay, and this system of rules, okay, is recognized by the state. This system of rules is recognized by the state and, if necessary, enforced. Okay, so in order to extract the narrow interpretation from there, we need to look at the following. Okay, when we extract the narrow interpretation, okay, Our clues are the following words. Our clues are the words governing or controlling human conduct. Okay. So students, just give me a second. There's a huge Rio Batse.
It's real Tadetse.
Switch off your mic, please. You are going to burst my ears. Okay, apologies about that, students. So, students, when we look at the clues on what a narrow interpretation is, a narrow interpretation of the law, our first clue is that we look at the words rules governing human conduct. So there are rules governing human conduct, and our second clue is if necessary, enforced. Okay, so yeah, my question to you is okay, and this is a fundamental question. Where does this consent of us as humans come from? Giving us, giving the state permission to govern our behavior. Where does this stem from? Can someone give me an answer? Where does this stem from? Where we as humans give permission to the state to govern our behavior. Okay? Where does this stem from? Anyone? Where does this stem from? Okay, Michelle, good answer. Michelle, I'm impressed with you. This stems from the social contract. And what, okay, next question. What is the basis of the social contract, students? What is the basis of the social contract Michelle is referring to? What is the basis of the social contract which Michelle is referring to? What is the basis of the social contract Michelle is referring to? Anyone? What is the basis of the social contract Michelle is referring to? Okay? People, you don't want to engage with me tonight. Okay, next question. Who are the parties to the social contract Michelle is referring to? Who are the parties to this social contract Michelle is referring to? Okay, Joy, as humans, we want a sense of order, so it stems from us as individuals wanting control over us. Good answer, Joy. Joy, who are the parties to this social contract? Who are the parties to this social conflict? Who are the parties to the social conflict? Anyone? Where's Denzel? Okay. The state, Denzel, not the state and the community. Okay. It's the state and private, the state and the individuals. Okay. So this social contract is the state and the individual. Okay. And the basis of this contract is myself as individual. I pledge to obey the rules you implement for me, and you as the state, you provide me with social order, you provide me with justice and protection, you provide me with social services such as housing, health, etc. Okay? And in return, I will be a good citizen. Okay? So in a if we look at law in a strict sense, okay, the basis of that relationship is the social contract between the state and the individual. And it tells us the law is a body of rules governing human conduct by the state and, if necessary, enforced. Okay, so if we look at the part where, if necessary, enforced, um, it speaks of a punitive aspect, meaning that if the individual transgresses the rules, okay, governing human conduct that has been put in place by the state, okay, the state has the right to punish the individual if necessary. Okay, so in a narrow or a strict sense, we are referring to the branch of law being that branch of public law with specific reference to our body of criminal law. If we look at the concept of law in a a strict or a narrow interpretation. Okay. Um, then, are there any questions for me, students? Any questions before I continue? Just see if there's questions or comments. Okay. Okay. Denzel, you're right. This question comes in the paper every year, and most of the time people get it wrong. Okay. Because your starting point should be from what interpretation you are viewing the law. Okay. Um, then I want us to go to the wider or broader interpretation. Okay. So if we look at law in a more wider sense, okay, it looks at regulating. Okay, so here we're moving away from control to regulating various relationships. Okay, so if we look at law in a wider sense, okay, the function of the law or the purpose of the law is to regulate those relationships between private individuals in order to create harmony in society. Okay, so here the law moves away from the punitive aspect. Okay, moves away from the punitive aspect in the stricter sense, where it does not aim to punish. Okay, but now it aims to create what? A specific situation. And the situation it aims to create is, is order in society. Okay? It's there to create order. Okay? In society, the law is there to regulate relationships between individuals in order to create um, order in society. And here we are looking more at the relationship between individual and individual. Okay, so here we are looking at those private law relationships. Okay, that the law tries aims to regulate in order to create harmony in society. So the private law, when we speak of a private law relationship, we refer to our body of private law. And like I said yesterday, if we make an example of a private law relationship and how the law aims to create harmony in society, if we look at a simple employment relationship that is governed by an employment contract. So the parties to the employment relationship is the employer and the employee. And what regulates their relationship? The law regulates their relationship in terms of an employment contract. Okay? And the purpose of that employment contract is then to create harmony in society. Okay? That is what the wide or broader interpretation or meaning of the law speaks to. Any questions, students? Any questions so far? Okay. Now, students, you can, in terms of paragraph 1.3, make NB next to that. Okay? Because if we look at law in the context of a South African meaning, okay, what makes our legal system different and distinctive to that of most other jurisdictions? Anyone? Okay. Okay, let's see what the responses say. I see that there's a response from Paris. I see there's a response from There's a response from Joy. We have the Bill of Rights. Paris, the Bill of Rights. Denzel, no, we're making specific. Queen and Paris, we're making specific reference. What makes our legal system different to that of other jurisdictions is that our legal system is premised on constitutional values, those values of human rights and human dignity. Okay, so let's look at the following. Okay, so if we look at the second paragraph under paragraph 1.3, okay, firstly, law law creates and maintains peace and order in society. By doing what? By balancing the interests of the individual and those of the larger community or the state. But if you look at law in the South African context, okay, if you look at law in the South African context, it tells you the protection of the individual. Okay, the protection of the individual, that is the citizen and non-citizen. Okay, is controlled by the Constitution. Firstly, okay, so the protection of our rights as individuals, it's regulated or controlled by the Constitution. And in addition to that, the Constitution guarantees that our human rights as individuals will be protected against arbitrary violation by the state and other individuals. Okay, so if we look at section 7 of our Constitution, okay, it tells us that our Bill of Rights, okay, that is chapter 2 of our Constitution, which encompasses our fundamental human rights. It tells us our Bill of Rights in our Constitution is the cornerstone of our democracy in South Africa. Okay? It further goes on to say that it enshrines the rights of all people in our country, okay, and affirms the following, okay, democratic or constitutional imperatives, okay. Another word for democratic values are constitutional imperatives, okay, and it affirms those constitutional imperatives or democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. And there's automatically, okay, a responsibility on the state, okay. The state, you see the words are, are must, it's peremptory, okay. The state must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. Okay, very, very importantly, also, if you go to the next line, we refer to the section of the Constitution because it makes clear how a social contract creates and maintains order amongst humans. Okay, any questions for me so far? Any questions for me so far? Okay. Then, very importantly, if you go to the third paragraph on page 10, okay, what is Michelle saying? We have a constitution with a Bill of Rights, which ours is our supreme law. Yes, Michelle. It tells us also there that the law, also serves to maintain peace and order, okay, by controlling the relationship between individual members of the community or citizens as legal subjects. Okay, I spoke about that. That's the wide interpretation. And this role, as I said, is performed by our body of civil law or private law. Okay, so very, very importantly about our private law, okay, it protects the rights of an individual from being tampered with or disturbed with by another member of the community. Okay, and it also speaks of that dual relationship, that the relationship between legal subject and legal subject, as well as legal subject and legal object. Okay, any questions for me so far? Any questions? Let's continue. Let's continue. Um, I'm going to jump a few pages and then I want us to look at the following. Okay. The only thing I'm going to look at here is the difference between learning and studying. Okay, that is something you will be tested on. Okay, so um, okay, let's look at the concept of studying. Okay, and I'm by paragraph 2.2.2 on page 16. Okay, so it tells us there the concepts of studying and learning are easily confused. Let's see why. Okay, although their meanings are different, they are at the same time closely related to each other. Okay, they are at the center of any meaningful study process. Okay, so it tells us in line 3, when we talk about studying, we mean the work that you usually do on your own, and that requires a lot of self discipline. So, studying, you should know firstly, is, is a process that is achieved by the learner or the person studying exercising self discipline. Okay, and it tells us in simple terms, when we talk about studying, we mean the work you do on your own, and this requires self discipline. Okay, then you they go on to say that studying requires that you use various skills, okay? And those skills involve reading textbooks and other texts, organizing your notes, the writing of assignments and essays in an academically acceptable manner, preparing for tests and exams, and demonstrating your competence in that regard, and so on. So, put differently, when you study, it means you physically engage in the process of organizing the studying materials and using them to acquire knowledge for a certain purpose. And that purpose is for writing exams and um, writing assignments. Okay, so we know now that studying is a process, okay, where you physically engage in doing something, okay, and that is what your study materials, okay. But when we look at learning, okay, it is the impact of the process of studying on the student, okay. So it tells us here it is possible for one to collect all the necessary materials, engage in what one might tell yourself is studying without learning anything from the process. Okay? So now I'm going to make an example which illustrates the difference between studying and learning. Okay, let's say you are a law student. Okay, and the module you are registered for, the module you are now registered for is the law of succession. Okay, so the law of succession basically deals with the process that is followed by the law when a person dies. Okay? And when that person dies, this process now ensues on how his or her assets that they leave behind, how those assets are regulated. Okay? That is what the law of succession entails. And mostly, in terms of the law of succession, you either have a valid will or you die without a will. Okay, so I'm going to explain the following to you now. Okay, I'm going to explain the following to you now. So let's say ek het nou vir iets gebring. So it's a later wag. So sorry about that, students. So let's say you enrolled for the module of the law of succession. What happens now is you get the relevant legislation, you get the textbooks, you start organizing yourself and whatever. Okay. And at the end of the semester, you pass the law of succession with 98%. Okay. My question is, have you learned, yes or no? My question is, have you learned, yes or no? Who can answer that question for me? Michelle, why are you saying no?
Good evening, Advocate.
Yes.
I think the only way of testing whether you've learned or not is whether you are able to apply that knowledge or not. So that needs to be tested.
Okay,
To
and how
decide to
does
see
one
whether
test that?
by being able to apply it to a legal scenario and to come up with a solution using the law of succession.
So how is that done for law students?
How is it done for law students?
Mm.
It's when they're given a scenario and they're able to go and access the law of succession and extract information to come up with a remedy.
No.
No.
Uh-uh.
Well, I was wondering whether I was wondering about that because my husband got a fine and I was trying to look at the Traffic Act, and I didn't know what to extract to apply it to the situation.
Okay.
And
So,
I didn't, and I thought that now I know where to go and find the source, but how do I look for the information I want to extract? So for me, I felt like I didn't learn enough.
okay. So I want you to look at the following. Look at the answer which is given by Perez.
Okay.
So if we look at Perez's answer, students, in order to ascertain whether you have learned, okay, we look at your practical vocational training, okay, and that is the period, okay, after you attain your LLB degree and you now either go do your articles or you go do your period of pupillage. Okay, that is when you ascertain whether you've learned or not. Does that make sense, students? Does that make sense? Anyone? Michelle, does that make sense to you?
Yes, so that makes sense. So that would be
Okay.
the actual test then, would be
Yes.
whether you succeed in your practical vocational training, where you completed
Okay.
that.
Because what is the purpose of the practical vocational period? Okay. Uh, the clue is given to you in the word practical, because now remember, during this 4 or 5 years of your LLB degree, okay, what do we do in academia? We pump you so full of theory, okay? We pump you so full of theory because you do criminal law, you do the law of skill, you do skills, you do the law of evidence, you do the law of delict, you do the law of property, okay? You do criminal law, you do all those law modules, okay? But in doing all those law modules, you have no practical experience, okay? So that is why you will now do your 2 years of articles or your 1 year of pupillage, where you take all the theoretical knowledge you've attained over the past 4 or 5 years in your LLB degree, and that is applied to practical situations. Okay, that is applied to practical situations in order to give you the practical experience. Okay, so when in terms of your practical vocational training, that is when the real learning takes place. Okay? That is when the real learning takes place. Let's continue. Okay, I'm going to jump the following. Okay. I'm going to jump the study process because that is something I did in detail. So those of you who want me to do the study process with you, you'll have to arrange an individual consultation session with me. Okay, let's go to the following. Students from, let me just give you the following guidance. Aside from what I did, okay, please regard the following as very, very important. Okay, so the following pages, please regard them as very, very important. From page 22, the whole aspect of motivation. So from page 22, right up until page 35. That is very, very important. Okay, those aspects. Okay, so those of you who want me to do that with you, you'll have to arrange individual sessions. Yeah? Um, let's go to the following. Um, Paragraph 3.3 on page 37. I want you to go to paragraph 3.3 on page 37 for me. Okay. And firstly, how to read an act of parliament. Okay. So, very, very importantly, students, an act of parliament is also referred to as a statute or legislation. Okay. It's also referred to as a statute or legislation, and very, very importantly, this is part of our body of codified law. It's part of our body of codified law, and it's also referred to as paper law or soft law. Okay, it's also referred to as paper law or soft law. Okay, so the term legislation is essentially a general term for acts of parliament, and that's divided into three categories. Sorry, students. I don't know what happened, but I disconnected there for a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so where was I? I was telling you that the term legislation means an act of parliament, and it's divided into three categories. Okay, namely national legislation, provincial legislation, as well as local legislation or bylaws. So what you must be very mindful of, students, what you must be very mindful of is that legislation can be passed on a national level, on a provincial level, as well as a local level. What is also very, very important about this is that national legislation, okay, which is passed by our national parliament, okay, is binding on our entire country. So national legislation is binding on our entire country, and examples of this is our Children's Act, our Child Justice Act, and our Road Traffic Act. Okay, it's binding on the entire country. You should know by now that in terms of the structure of our country, okay, our country is divided into 9 provinces. Okay, and each province has its own legislature, meaning each province has the competency to pass legislation applicable to that specific province only. Okay, so you will notice that for the various 9 provinces, I'm giving you a simple example now. For the various 9 provinces, very, very simple. Each province has different number plates. Okay, look at the number plates in the Western Cape. Look at that of the Eastern Cape. Look at the number plates in Gauteng. They all are different. So licensing and licensing procedures is regulated by provincial legislation. Okay, so and then we're looking at local or municipal legislation, which we refer to as bylaws. Okay, so it means our municipal authorities have the competency or the jurisdiction to pass laws relating to various authorities. So these are local laws or bylaws which relates to noise, it relates to nuisance, it relates to garbage removal, it relates to permits for animals, abattoirs, things like that. Okay, so yes, let's continue. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Any questions for me? Let me see if there's questions. Okay. Joy. So in your experience, how do we start practicing in the beginning stages of our learning? Any suggestions? Okay, Joy, I'm going to answer that question later. Yeah? Joy, I'm going to answer your question before I conclude with the session. Okay. So, very, very importantly, students, legislation is published in government's official newspaper. Okay, so when government wants to communicate anything official to its citizens, okay, it's published in government's official newspaper, which is known as the Government Gazette. So all legislation will be published in the Government Gazette. Okay, so you will therefore find all national legislation in our Government Gazette. Okay, so very, very importantly, students, you can search for legislation. Students, you are able to search for legislations in 3 various ways. Okay, you are able to do an alphabetical search of titles. Okay, that is when the short title of the act is used. You are able to do a subject search. Okay, meaning keywords or the subject line of the title is used, and then you are able to do a chronological search of the act, meaning this is the number of the act and the year of publication. Okay, so we're going to so what I want you to do is to go through activity 3.1. Okay, activity 3.1, I will touch on that in our final revision again, and then I want you to go to something very, very important, which I'm going to take a few minutes to look at now, and that is on page 39. We're going to look at paragraph C, and we're going to look at presumptions relating to law. Okay, we're going to look at presumptions relating to legislation. Okay, we're going to look at those presumptions relating to legislation. And the first presumption relating to legislation, students, you can put NB next to that. That's very important. You must know that. So the first presumption relating to legislation is that legislation is presumed. Okay, legislation is presumed not to have any meaningless sections. Okay, legislation is presumed not to have any meaningless sections. So if you look at most of our new pieces of legislation, and now I'm speaking post 1994, okay, all of those legislation in terms of section 1 of that legislation sorry, my sound went off. In terms of section 1 of those legislation, it has a definition section, okay, where the meaning to most of the words being used in that specific legislation is given to you, okay. Very, very importantly, legislation is presumed not to change existing laws unless it states so explicitly. So very, very importantly, legislation is not there to change existing laws. Okay. Thirdly, legislation is presumed not to intend unreasonable and unfair consequences. Okay. And then lastly, legislation is presumed to apply to future events only. Okay. That is the general rule. Okay. The general rule is legislation is presumed to apply to future events only and not act retrospectively. So retrospectivity, okay, it does happen, but it's regarded as the exception to the rule. Okay. So students, can anyone give me an example relating to retrospectivity of legislation? Can anyone give me an example relating to retrospectivity of legislation? That is what you mean by slavery. That is what you mean by slavery. Okay. Joanne is also saying, Joey is saying, um, previously I think you mentioned the Sexual Offences Act. Joy, very good, very good. What about the Sexual Offences Act? Okay, what speaks to retrospectivity in the Sexual Offences Act? Very good, the Sexual Offences Register. Okay, so in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, okay, the National Register for Sexual Offenders that operates retrospectively. Very good. What's this lady's name? Joy. Very good. Okay. Very good answer. Let's continue. There's about 15 minutes or so left. Let's continue. Okay, next we're going to go to paragraph 3.4, how to read a court case. So in terms of how to read a court case, when you are given a case citation, students, what are the first aspects thereof you must be able to identify? What are the first aspects thereof you must be able to identify? What are the first aspects you must be able to identify? Nadia gave a response now. Nadia, let me see your response. Okay, Michelle and Denzel, that is the answer I want. You must relate. You must relate whether it's a criminal or a civil matter. Okay, you must be able to distinguish whether it's a criminal matter or a civil matter. Further question to you, students. If it is a civil matter, okay, what else must you able, what else must you able to, what else must be distinguishable? What else should you be able to distinguish? Okay, if it's a civil matter, okay, if you distinguish that it is a civil matter, what else must you able, what else must you be able to be distinguished? Okay, students, I think I'm experiencing some problems with my sound tonight, so just bear with me. Okay, very good, Joy. Denzel, that is not what I'm looking for. Joy is on the right track. You must also be able to distinguish whether it's an appeal matter or not. Michelle, you're on the right track. You must be able to distinguish what kind of proceeding it is, whether we're looking at an action proceeding or whether we are looking at an application proceeding. Okay, so students, very, very importantly, in terms of a court case, you must be able to identify the parties. You must be able to state in which law report the matter was published. In which law report the matter was published. Students, just give me a second. My work phone is ringing. Hello. Okay, sorry about that. You must be able to distinguish the law report. You must able to distinguish the page number. You must be able to distinguish the court. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that there. If you have problems in finding a case, you have to send me an email and then I'll clarify that. You must be able to know all of the law reports that are used in South Africa. You must be able to cite all of the courts. So pages, the following pages are important for you to study verbatim. Page 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, and then I am going to stop here because when I continue tomorrow, okay, remember I'm having a makeup session for skills for law students tomorrow, okay, having a makeup session at 5:30 tomorrow for skills for law students. Then I'm going to start with the various types of judgments. Okay, so students, Adele has put the link in for the evaluation form. Please complete the evaluation form and um, um, yes, and then remember, you are able to book one-on-one sessions with me, but this discussion will continue tomorrow. Remember, last week, this time I was in Joburg and I couldn't make the class. So my makeup class for this session is tomorrow at 5:30, and we will continue with the various types of judgments. Okay, students. So if there's nothing else, we will continue tomorrow evening. Okay, students, any questions before I log off? Any questions before I log off?
Hi, Advocate, it's Denzel.
Okay, Denzel, before I speak to you, Nadia, a reminder of our, yes, I will be online for our 1 o'clock session tomorrow. I won't forget, Nadia. Denzel, what is your question?
Will Adele just send another email for tomorrow's session so we can block it out with a code for the meeting? First of all, that's my first question.
Okay,
We
I'll
don't need
ask
any-
Adele to do the admin regarding that. Remember, I just do the lessons.
Yeah.
And Adele provides me with the necessary online support. So I'll just inform Adele about that. Ne?
And Joyce, you didn't answer Joyce's question she asked.
Okay, Joy,
Yeah.
in terms of your question, what I do is, this was now pre-COVID and I need to find a workable solution to this. Remember, pre-COVID, I was based at the UNISA Learning Center out in Parel. So what I did with my students, because I did lots of community outreach in terms of giving free legal advice at various law clinics in poor or indigent communities. What I did was I had a program where I went to various communities and I drew up walls for various persons in these communities, because remember, legal services are expensive and a person will rather pay electricity, buy food, than consult with a lawyer to draw up a will. So I used to do this for free. So many of my UNISA students went with me to shadow me, job shadow me, in terms of seeing how I consult with clients, how I draw up a will, the advice I give them, and the instructions that I take. So that is also a way of me inculcating a more practical aspect to the way I teach. Okay, but let's see what happens after COVID, and then we will do that again. Okay, Denzel?
Sorry, Advocate, can I just say something else quickly?
I'm listening.
I've just got a message from one of my colleagues, or not a friend of mine. So if anybody is interested, on Saturday the 21st of November in Athlone, they've got free legal advice and there's support for gender-based violence. So there will be lawyers available at an address that they've given me. So it will be also maybe useful if anybody want to attend there to see how they.
You might also see me there then as one of the lawyers giving legal advice. Okay, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. Yes, I'm aware of that. So you can just type the details into the chat function for us. Yeah? Thanks, Denzel. Okay, students, if there's nothing else, we chat to each other tomorrow evening. Okay, you guys have a good evening and we'll chat tomorrow. Don't forget to fill in the evaluation form. And those of you who must still add your student numbers to the chat, please add your student numbers. We chat tomorrow. Thank you, students. Bye.
Hi, Denzel.
How's it? I'm just typing it in now.
Oh, I was gonna say you might as well talk. You can talk to us. We can listen. What is it all about on Saturday?
No, the message I got on my Facebook was just, it says the Athlone District Advice Office, free legal advice and assistance, housing problems, labor issues, divorce matters, maintenance, consumer, rental, shop arrears, family issues, evictions, estates. Saturday the 21st of November, Bridgetown Mosque, Cornflower Street, Bridgetown. And it's open to the community from 9 o'clock to 12. I'm busy writing it in now, yeah.
Oh, you're putting it in.
I'll also leave a phone number there. I see there's a phone number here as well.
So how would we be? Would we be able to listen in on the advice? We wouldn't. How would we? What role what could we do?
Observer probably, and just I think that's what Advocate Owen was about. If we can see how certain cases get handled, I think that's what he was more interested in. It's a practical experience that we're
So
picking up.
we can sort of stand on the sidelines and listen in.
Just listen type of thing. That's what I would think, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
We'll paste it in now.
Thanks, Denzel. Just on that, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Awesome. So would they allow us to listen in from a student perspective? Because I know some of the matters, wouldn't that be like personal stuff?
I suppose if it comes to personal stuff, then obviously it's a personal matter, but there's a wide, it looks like there's a wide variety of matters they can assist on. So it's not just divorce or wills or things like that.
Variety, yeah.
It's a variety, yeah. What's nice about it, I see what caught my eye was there was support for gender-based violence and domestic violence. So even if we don't talk to the people, we can probably talk to the conveners and probably get some information from them.
Are you adding the Facebook link into this thing also, into the link here on this chat or no?
I actually got it from somebody. I'm going to try and share it in the UNISA Law Clinic on Facebook. Is that all right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, thanks.
I'll just try and share it quickly.
And so who's organizing this event?
Oh,
that will be in the link.
It just says the Athlone District Advice Office. Okay, I've posted it in the link. I mean, I've posted it in the Facebook UNISA Law Clinic. I've just posted it. As well. And I would probably attend just to, I think, Joy, I've got the same thing. I want to know a little bit more practical.
Just another question. Are you guys finding it difficult to access the e-books from the library, from EBSCO-host, like Introduction to Legal Skills, the books from the footnotes? Or are you all still able to access that? How are you accessing those books? Because I'm not able to access those books from EBSCO-host. There's been a problem.
From where, Michelle?
From the UNISA library. I used to access e-books from EBSCO-host, but
I must admit, I haven't used the online functionality